so stoked to see like what you're doing and all the attention you're getting and the important work that you're putting out there. I think it's incredible.
Thank you, Jessica. That's really nice. Feel like I'm just like a concerned mom and just talking about the things that we're all like this morning at my workout. We're all talking about the kids' iPads and what they have access to. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm covering right now in this podcast. So it's like just the conversations that I'm already having, but just trying to amplify. And because there's no answers, parents are just like, feel completely out of control of the devices and the school devices and everything. And there's got to be some power we have here, some control or some answers.
We have lots. We just have to remember, so You're right. I mean, it comes from that concerned place. And I don't know, I see something happening now. I've been having these conversations for the better part of a decade, but the past 6 months has been really, really hopeful.
Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have Jessica Elefante, a writer, artist, and activist. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And first I thought we could just get to know each other a little bit. So tell me like where you're from and what brought you to work in this space.
Yeah. So I live in New York. I'm in Brooklyn, and I kind of accidentally fell face first into this space. I never thought this would be what I was doing with my life. But I worked in marketing and branding for a really long time before we had all these apps. And when the apps started to realize that they could, be a place to monetize for brands and things like that, I had this sort of old lingo that I was able to explain to the C-suite why they needed to put money behind this and build out these communities in these social media platforms. And so I literally started a class called Viral Networking 101 for small business owners and corporate people to understand what the heck this was. And I guess the really abridged version is I did that for a long time with a lot of standard success and accolades. But at the same time that I was being rewarded, I started feeling really unwell myself, and I didn't know what it was. Doctors tried to figure out what was making me have such a significant memory loss, malaise, brain fog, disassociation, lack of word recall, and nobody had any answers. And you named any suggestion, I tried it, it didn't work. But I found out what it was. It was my overuse of technology, and the fact that I was one of the earliest adopters of using it in this way of kind of 24/7 communicating on behalf of my clients, that I had gone without tech for 8 days, not by choice, forced by my ex-husband at the time on a family vacation. Today, you would call it a digital detox. And my brain switched back on completely and wholly. I could tell you what the sheets felt like underneath my skin. I had a vivid memory of smelling like the salt in the air. I was in Hawaii and I hadn't noticed it the first 8 days, but I woke up and I could smell the salt, and just everything was so like vivid and clear. And when I talk about this now, or at first back then, people would come up to me and they'd say, that's the sound of an addict getting sober. That you say the same things of, myself who was, I've been sober 20 years and no one was making these parallels. At the time, it was like 2012, 2013. And today it's known as digital dementia. And unfortunately, the rest of society is likely caught up with me at this point. And so I came back from that vacation and decided to start using all my evil marketing powers for good and advocating for change around how we think of technology and digital worlds. And I really, truly believed that we could change our relationship with it, and that the creators of these platforms had some motivations to listen to what I was saying and what people were feeling to protect us and make it a place that was fostering real connection and allowing people to be creative and not all the negatives that came with it. And I spent almost a decade, I guess now, talking about hacking our way out of this and laying the responsibility, I now realize, at the feet of people or children saying you should be able to set a timer. Oh, you should put your phone away. Why are you always on it? And, offering these sort of tips, tricks, and suggestions through my company, which is called Folk Rebellion. And I came to terms in a very hard way that it was not possible to have a healthy relationship with tech and digital until it's designed that way. And so I wrote a book called Raising Hell, Living Well, Freedom from Influence in a World Where Everyone Wants Something from You, including myself, because I'm making an ironically persuasive case that you shouldn't fall for these things and be manipulated. And that's kind of what leads me to you today. I know it's a lot, but that's the journey. And I get really excited when I see people like you and what's happening in culture right now. There's just so many good people doing such good work of sharing these stories and bringing attention to this thing when most people thought I was nuts a decade ago.
God, that must have been such a frustrating, long 10 years because you really, you were seeing it right at the beginning. I mean, and that's right when the kids started getting really affected and when we start seeing those spikes of depression and suicidal ideation, especially in young girls. We didn't have that research at the time, but you were seeing it in yourself.
Exactly.
Because we weren't really at first letting kids into those digital worlds as much. I think it really happened, right? Through those 2010s, 12, 14, those years. We have such a similar background because I was in marketing too for almost 15 years and started my own social media management business because I noticed small business owners who were, my parents were restaurant owners, started there, and they had no idea how to do social media. And I realized like they need to be on social media in order to compete with they had a pizza place with Pizza Hut and all these big brands. And so I helped them set up their social media platforms and just sort of built from there. But yeah, I started to also feel some feelings about what I was doing and how I was targeting people and how detailed you could get and manipulating decisions and also reflecting on how it was making me feel as like a young mom with little kids and sharing them on there. I wonder how that played into it. Like, what are your feelings about where did your kids come into play and how did you feel about sharing them on social media?
Yeah. So, I mean, I left corporate America and started Folk Rebellion because I had this just recurring thought. If I became this addicted and unwell in such a short span of time, having had a full life without any of this, like I'm from like the Adirondacks. I didn't get a cell phone until I was in my 20s. We didn't have a family computer, like nothing. We had nothing. If I became this addicted and unwell in such a short period of time, like what did the future look like? How did these kids have any chance if they don't even know a world that's different, right? So I started it for Hayes, my oldest, and trying to change the world for him. You know, it's such a big altruistic idea, but why do we do anything? We do it for our kids, right? And even then, like right now, so I have very small social media profile. Like I have one professionally for Folk Rebellion or my personal, my creations.
Yeah.
And then I have an alias that I've had from day one on Facebook that only people who like really know me, right? My OG friends, my family, that's on Facebook. Yeah. But now everything is blurring and it's hard to keep hiding one from the other. And even with my more public one on Instagram, I would share a little bit of my kids', previously it was never centered around them. I didn't create content around them. Yeah. But if I shared a piece of my life and they happened to be a part of it, it was there. It wasn't a lot, but it was there. But what's happened now is kind of how I'm seeing things roll out with AI and just the lack of any sort of help, or no one's coming to save us, any regulation, that all of this stuff, I can't possibly predict anymore whose hands it's going to end up in and how it's going to be used. So people have noticed I've started for the first time ever, like covering, if I do share anything, I cover their face, even if it's in profile.
Yeah.
I'm removing everything that I have put up of them. I'm getting rid of, their names, like anything, again, 10 years ago, like you would post on Instagram with the cheesy filter, the lo-fi filter. Like no one thought anything of having a few friends because you couldn't possibly predict or understand where this was going to go and how exploited we would all be by buying into this sort of free service that then is just stealing from us our children's faces, their names, the language in which we communicate. And so everything is for my kids. I'm backtracking actually at the 1 year anniversary of my book coming out. I'm deleting all my profiles.
Okay.
I have to keep that on just because there were people who helped me and I want to help them in return, right? So that's why it's there, but I'm barely using it.
Yeah.
With my kids, I also have a 2-year-old now. So I'm able to speak at how different things are a decade later. And they don't get anything. I'm the mean mom. I really am.
Yeah, I kind of resent the mean mom comment. I'm sort of like, we're giving them the gift of like a healthy brain,
Of course, for sure. And a normal child, and not a normal childhood, a childhood free from exploitation and danger and being pigeonholed and identified to later become good consumers and
focusing on a play-based childhood. And I'm doing a series with teachers right now called Teachers Talk. I'm just interviewing teachers about screen use in schools. And one interesting thing that's always coming up is kids can't pay attention for very long, and they definitely can't be bored. We all know that. But because from when they were babies, anytime they were uncomfortable or upset, we handed them an iPad to play with.
Pacifier.
Yeah. And they had no ability to develop those skills. And now they all have smartphones as well. So we digitally pacify them while they're at school. Even when they have a problem, they can just text us and we reassure them over text. So really just no skills on how to pacify themselves, to calm themselves, to be bored. And so I think more parents are realizing now. I have a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And we don't do any devices and that kind of thing. And I think we're coming around to realize the harm in handing them those devices at those super young ages, just not necessary.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's kind of crazy to me to think that there are still people trying to provide solutions to these kids and this problem, and these teachers saying, oh, well, we'll bring in like a mindfulness app, right? And so here's the device again that, as opposed to actual learning human skills and having the connection that they need. And so that idea that like techno supremacy, like it's gonna fix everything. We've got to turn to tech every time, when in fact, as you said, it's play-based, it's removing, letting them feel uncomfortable, putting them together in a, puppy pile, figure out how to play. I think that like a lot of my work or viewpoints or philosophies came from the fact of like, I was born before any of this. I was raised like a 1980s Goonie, like get outside, like don't come home until supper.
Yeah.
And then I had the very opposite experience of this crazy digital environment. And when I looked to my kid, I wanted him to have a lot of what I had, but around me, things were changing where I didn't have the power to say I wanted him to play outside by himself, because I was afraid, like culture was shifting so quickly that I wasn't afraid of him getting hurt or stolen by a man in a white van, stranger danger. I was afraid of a neighbor calling Child Protective Services. And so I think a lot of this is all under the same umbrella of like we dash into these cultural norms of what's okay or expected, but intrinsically for me, I know it's wrong, or I feel it's wrong, or I believe it's wrong. And so for me, tech and the overprotection of kids and wanting them to play outside and it just kind of all lives together. And it's nice to see, with Jonathan Haidt's new book out, and Lenore, her program Let Grow is the 4th recommendation. And Lenore actually blurb to my book, which I was so proud of because I have a chapter called 80s Mom, which is essentially the argument that Jonathan Haidt's book makes, which is that we've overprotected kids in the real world and literally just dropped them off at the local, dive bar, the online world, with no protections whatsoever. And so I wanted Lenore to read my book, and she did, and she's a rock star. So it kind of feels like there's a lot of wood being added to the fire right now, and I'm hopeful.
Yeah. I hope we get to a point where instead of feeling like someone should call CPS because your kid's playing in the front yard, CPS should be called if your kid is on their device at night by themselves with unrestricted internet access. Like that's abuse.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think that someday we are going to look back and it's going to be horrifying to see what we've done. In the same way, it'd be like looking at a bunch of children smoking cigarettes in photos, right?
Right.
If we were to see that today, of what we'd be horrified. But it takes a long time for humans, normal sort of what they think is normal to shift. But it's shifting. It is starting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this 10 years. I'm saying it's just starting now.
Yeah. And I just think I got lucky with like the timing. I don't know. I started the podcast in September, and then there's just like Congress hearing, like lawsuits, more parents speaking up, more books. It's just on a roll, and I can just feel this momentum, and I feel more parents talking about it. And I'm so happy that I'm part of the conversation and that I can like elevate voices that like yours that have been trying to say this for years.
Yeah, no, we need that because, and honestly, it was funny. I was talking with Jonathan Haidt and his team, and they're like, we're so grateful for the outpouring of support from people who have been in this fight for a long time, because he didn't come from this. He came from something else. It's just what he saw and was able to make sense of it. And I was like, are you kidding me? All ships rise. It's not, there's no ego in this game. Like, it's all about the kids. It's all about the next generation. It's fixing the world. And those of us who've been here for a little while, we're tired and we're burnt from the internet and creating the content engines and all of that. So it feels nice to go, you know what? I don't have to get out there like I did, 6 years ago, because there's other voices here now. And it feels really awesome to be able to say that.
Yeah. So I think we'll start to see some legislation maybe to help.
I was in Albany 2 weeks ago. I hope so.
Oh my God. It's like, come on. Legislation, also schools actually not only banning smartphones in schools, but following through with it from the district level, not leaving it all to the teachers to try to implement, struggling.
Yep.
So, but it still does come down to the parents and their decisions in the home. And so what are some of the, like a couple of the most important things that you think parents need to be thinking about when it comes to screen use in their kids?
Everyone's different because their kids are at different ages and their situations are different. But I would say the first thing you could do if you don't have smartphones is delay, right? And that kind of goes for anything for me. I'm talking iPads, smartphones, video game consoles, access to anything that has the cloud. I've always said, someone came up with the slogan, delay is the way. I used to just say, I'm kicking the can so far down the road, I can't see it. Like, even like my son will ask me tonight, Mom, can I get an iPhone when I'm 18? I went, we'll discuss it when we're 18. I just keep kicking it further and further. Yeah. So that's like one of the better things that you could do. And then if you do have any of these devices, it's understanding that first and foremost, just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It is most likely happening. And when I say it is happening, it is probably all the things that you don't want to happen, right? So they are definitely seeing inappropriate content, right? They are definitely experiencing or being bullies in these sort of realms.
Sure.
Their data is being stored, collected, saved, and utilized against them at some point in the future if it's not already. They are becoming lulled into submission through dopamine addiction, through any sort of algorithm that they're on. And so even though you may not see it what I'm finding is a lot of people will say, the first thought is like, not my kid, or I've protected them, or this stuff is so smart, and these people are so smart that they are going to find ways through. And so even when you think you're being safe, likely it's not. So I always say instead of just banning, you have to talk about why, and bring it back to education and values. So my son, I wrote this book for Hayes. It's the thing. I kind of think of it like food and movies, right? We have our rules in our house, but other houses different rules. And I still want you to be able to go to other kids' houses, but have a good head on your shoulders. Hopefully I've done my due diligence of knowing the type of houses he's going to and the type of families he's with. But when he's there, if he's going to play a video game, he's going to play a video game. If someone is on an iPad or has a phone out that's on TikTok, like, he knows I don't want him on it. I don't want him to see it. So he asks to do something else. This was an incident of they had a video studio set up, and his friend was showing him how you could bounce a ball throughout the room and make it disappear and show up in different places. And he was having so much fun, almost like the producer of this. And I was like, I get that. I'm a creative. That's really fun. Well, he knows that you're not allowed to have his likeness shared anywhere or posted anywhere. And that I told him, he has to give consent or get my consent. So the kid, he had called to ask if they can make the video. I said, yes, of course. And then the kid went to go upload it to a YouTube channel. And he goes, oh, no, you don't have my consent to do that. And the kid goes, what's that? And so it started, and he called me in a panic. And I was like, it's okay. Like, are you doing anything embarrassing in it? Make sure your name doesn't end up in any of the data in the copy that he writes. It's fine. We'll talk about it when we get home. When he gets home. So he came home and he's like, essentially, not in these words, but like, what the hell, Mom? Like, I'm the weird kid, and he says to me, he goes, I know these things because you taught me and we talk about them, but other people don't know these things and the adults don't know these things. So what am I supposed to do? Can't you just tell everyone? And I was like,
I'm trying, honey.
Okay. I'm trying. I'm like, maybe I need to put it all together in like this guide, right? So that's how the book came about. And all I know is I can't control what happens when he goes out in the world. I can control how much the world comes at him in my own home. Right? Like, I see it as like the outside world is let in through any one of these. I call them like portals to predators. And the predators can be like misogynistic, like crazy shock jock podcasters, to, advertisements that are super inappropriate on a video game that I have ad blockers on. All of these things have happened with him having no phone and no devices. So think about that, right? So we talk about how always bring it to me. We'll figure it out together. And when he asks like, oh, what would have happened? I say, let's play the game. What could have happened? So for example, someone handed him a postcard outside of school, an invitation to a party in the city. I can remember this vividly from when I was 15, being invited by kids from another school or a high school, handing me a pamphlet or a flyer. This one had a QR code on it. And the teacher snatched it and ripped it up and said, don't ever scan a QR code that you don't know. And he came home and he's like, well, I couldn't because he has a dumb phone. I don't have, I can't scan anything and I don't have the internet. And he goes, so what would have been on the other end of that QR code? And I go, well, let's play the game. What could have been? And the first thing he came out with was, it could have been someone blackmailing me to murder my family. I went, could have. It's crazy where your mind goes. What else could it have been? And it just got us to, and it's this idea that I can't always protect him, but like what our values are and what we believe in and what we don't, and why I'm not allowing these things. Like, he knows how the internet works. He knows that advertising is funneling through the algorithms, almost creating we talk about these things on a very deep level, and I have been doing it since he's been about 2 years old. So that's my advice to parents, is don't just ban it, but explain why, talk about it, and bring it back to your values.
Because before we know it, they're going to be out of our house and they're going to need to manage this themselves. So they have to understand those principles.
Well, yeah. And Also, I mean, it could just be something as simple as the kid sitting next to you is looking at, anything, right? Like pornography. It could be just TikTok that happens to have pornography kind of scrolling through it. Like,
Yeah.
so you have to hope that you have instilled the sense in your child to excuse themselves or tell you.
Well, so at his school, are smartphones allowed at the school?
They just got rid of them. So this has been a whole huge learning curve, which is awesome. So the thing that changed the game was the Surgeon General's warning.
Okay.
When that happened, finally, the first people were teachers or, principals to say, okay, at least in our school, the next day it came out. We are now a smartphone free, a phone free school, but the kids still come in with them. So they had to set up a whole system. And the system was that they would check them in upon arrival in first period. And then the device, because they're in middle school, would arrive to their last period and they would get it as they were walking out the door. So you don't have it for recess. It's not in your locker, things like that.
Amazing.
It was awesome. It was life-changing. My son was like, the whole feeling of the school changed because each one, friend by friend, would get a smartphone for a birthday or something. And he'd go, lost another one today. That was what he would say, like they died or something because they have gone into this realm that he wasn't in.
Yeah.
And so he was so excited about that. And then the kids figured out that they could say, I forgot it today or something. And they just keep it down in their backpack. And the school doesn't feel comfortable going through the property or something like that. And so I kept seeing all these panic emails in the past couple of weeks with everything that was going on in press and in the Senate and in the legislation.
Yeah.
So they said, please, can you tell your kids to turn their phones in, please? And then Hayes is like, I'm the only one who turns it in. I'm so embarrassed. So there was that whole problem. So I responded back to them and I was like, hey, I'm a part of Mothers Against Media Addiction. I'm the co-chair for the Brooklyn chapter, and I think I have an idea. I'd love to try it with you guys. What if you actually got the parents' permission to take the phone? So send out, let's do a Google submission template. What's your name? Does your child have a phone? Yes. Do you want them to turn it in? Yes. If they say they don't have it, do I have your permission to look for it? Yes. So now they have a spreadsheet. They open it up and it says, oh, actually, so-and-so, your mother says you do have a phone. And if you say no, to check your bag.
Yeah.
And I was like, we have to do something because they're going to continue lying. The school doesn't want to offend anyone for fear of whatever. I was like, just get the parents' permission. And it's working.
Good. Are any of them given over dummy phones or second phones?
No, not yet that I know of, but they're still young. So yeah, maybe that's high school.
I keep hearing about that. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so happy. And I feel like that's the only way it works is if you collect them at the beginning of the day. You cannot let them have it in their zipper pocket, in their pocket, in their locker even, because then they're running. First of all, they're going to the bathroom any moment they can to go to the locker. In between classes, they're not interacting because they're just at their lockers looking at their, there's no solution other than taking it.
And there is science, and this is what I would say to all the parents who want to start making changes for their kids. Find the bit of research that helps your case. So I know that there is science that proves that if there's a phone within a 1 foot radius that is there in your desk drawer, in your purse on the floor, it is distracting you from the moment because it's literally calling for you. That itch is so strong.
Yep.
If there's science about if a phone is on a table during a conversation at a restaurant, it shortens the conversation by 25 minutes because both people know that there's a world waiting for them, and that anxiety, which we all feel. I'm sitting here talking to you right now, and I know that people are trying to get a hold of me, right? It's that constant, always, and because it's so instant and urgent, we're not qualifying if it's an emergency or if it's just right. And so we're training our kids to accept that constant state of anxiety from overwhelm and digital pings and distracting ourselves from learning and being in conversation with our friends, even if it's just in our backpack on the floor. So don't allow it.
And let's culturally shift to parents. We don't need to be contacting our children all day long. If they do have a phone, that's what teachers are desperately asking parents. Don't text them to ask what they want for dinner. Don't ask about their test during the day. It's too distracting. Just because you have the ability to contact them doesn't mean you should. It's affecting their learning.
Right. Of course. Of course. And then it's like those fragmented conversations all day long. You know, my husband and I, we've talked about it, and sometimes we'll have to do like a reset. And I'm like, all these things you're asking me all day, we can talk about tonight when we sit down to eat. Like, just save it. Just like, we don't have to do everything in real time. I'm busy. I'm at work. I'm writing, or I'm with the kids.
Yeah.
Save it. Let us actually have a conversation at dinner about all these things. It makes it a more robust conversation. And also on that, like, they're distracting the kids from learning. But if, you know, one of the pushbacks that I keep hearing is like, people want their kids to have phones in case there's like a mass shooting or something bad happens at the school, but because they want them to be safe, or they want them to be safe, you know, on a smaller scale of walking to school or getting to school. But by having the phone, they are distracted from crossing the street and not paying attention, right? They're sharing potentially misinformation if it's just a fire drill out to parents everywhere, saying to friends, saying that there's an active whatever. Parents are now calling the school. In those moments, if you really want your child to be safe, you want them to be actually safe. And that means not having these devices, which make it unsafe. The idea of safety is trumping actual safety with these phones. Like, we've been conditioned to think that having them equals safety. And so it's actually the opposite, right? In every way, shape, and form. And so with my son, when he got his dumb phone, he started being like, you know, he'd go to the park a block and a half away. Oh, I forgot my phone. I need my phone. I was like, no, you don't. Why do you need your phone? You don't have to be tracked or be incommunicado to be safe. Like, to be safe means to use your brain. I trust you, and to be present. It doesn't mean having a phone on you.
No. I just said this yesterday, specifically in a school shooting situation. Having their phone on them makes them more unsafe. The lights and the dings, and we're supposed to be quiet and be paying attention and not trying to videotape the situation. Like, if a shooter walks into a classroom, a dark classroom, and a kid's phone lights up, that shooter's going to shoot at that phone. Like, let's just get really down to brass tacks. Like, those phones are not keeping them safe in a school shooting situation. And I've got hundreds of comments on certain videos saying my kid will have a phone on them because of school shootings. And it's like, let's think about what actually happens in a school shooting and not just blanket statement.
This is very similar to what happened with stranger danger and people putting their kids in the safe confines of their homes, because it was this idea that there's this horrific, terrible thing that no one ever wants to happen. Of course, they don't ever want their child to be a part of their club, but the risk is so actually small, like numbers wise, but you then make this huge shift in how you're raising them or what they're experiencing to account for that tiny, tiny, tiny percent, when the 99 other percent is actually doing more damage to them. And I'm really, really, like, I could think all day about what transpired between milk cartons with kids' faces on them, the DARE program, mixed with, you know, stranger danger and 5 o'clock news. If it leads, it bleeds. It was like the perfect storm of fear mongering for parents. And that is where you arrive at the overprotected helicopter generation. And now we're seeing what happens to those kids as adults, and they're anxious. And it's because they've never felt trusted to exist in a world, and they've been taught that they should be afraid of everything.
Hannah Ortel has a Delay Smartphones organization out of the UK. She shared something with me like, the stat is you'd have to leave your children out in your front garden for like 14 million years for them to get actually like abducted. It's actually such a low probability that they're actually going to get taken.
In that stereotypical sort of manner, right? And because even when you look at the numbers, which I have a lot of it, majority of it, 85%, I think I'll have to look at afterwards, is those kidnappings that you hear, they're family, right? It's child custody cases. It's things like that. So in that stereotypical sort of Dateline scenario that none of us ever want, it is essentially nil.
And so, well, if you think about it, so we're trying to protect them by keeping them inside and handing them devices, right? And then, right, they're like on devices for 3 hours a day. Now they have double the risk of depression and anxiety. It's like,
Of course.
and the high percentages of cyberbullying, like it doesn't even like compare. It's
No.
far more harmful being inside on a device than it is being outside and playing.
Exactly. It's kind of like the moral panic of making this huge drastic change that makes no sense. And actually the data provides that it's the opposite. You're doing them a disservice, you're harming them by doing this. But also to what I was saying of you can't just protect them. You have to protect them and explain why.
Yeah.
And so if instead of hiding your children away from the man in the white van, we could talk to them about these scenarios, if they ever occurred, how rare they are, and how we expect them to behave. So it comes back to that critical thinking that instead of just overprotecting them all the time, actually teach them how to exist in these horrifying situations if they do happen.
Yeah, because the risks are so high, especially online. Like when we grew up, most parents didn't talk to their kids about like pornography or about sex, say. So you had to figure it out from your friends or, figuring it out. So the risks weren't as great, right? Parents didn't have to tell us about it because we would figure it out. But nowadays, it's like if you're letting your kid figure out about porn and sex online, it's like crazy what they're seeing and it's not realistic. And so we have to have these types of uncomfortable conversations so that when they go online, they have some sense of reality and guidance and they can go to us to ask us about it because we already talked with them about it, right?
Exactly. I'm mad that we have to have these conversations. I'm mad that we have to talk about all of these different things. It's literally exhausting to think about the next thing that I have to teach him or bring up at the kitchen table and go through what our code of ethics or values is, because it's never ending bad actors or whatever, and never ending lack of protection from the people who are supposed to protect us, our government and educate. You know what I mean? So I'm tired. It's hard. This is not easy. And so the tech companies and media companies, they know this, right? And they know how easy it is to pacify them or hand this over instead of doing the hard parental work of saying no, listening to their whining, talking about all of these really inappropriate, hard things, finding workarounds for if your kid's being left out because they can't have a conversation about, my example is always, he came to me with Fortnite and he couldn't be a part of a conversation at a table at lunch because he'd never played Fortnite. And it wasn't actually about the video game. It was about belonging and being able to have the conversation with his friends. And so I went and I bought the stupid Fortnite books and we read them. And then I went and Googled the dances and then I taught them to him. This was exhausting. Yeah. I don't want to know either. I hate that I had to buy the books. I hate that that's what we had to talk about. But like it made him feel comfortable so that guess what? He didn't ask for Fortnite again for like another 6 years. But this is the hard work that we have to do. And I know we're all tired and we have so much on our plates, but we have to.
Okay, so tell me what you're working on. Tell me about Mothers Against Media Addiction and anything else that listeners can connect with you on.
Yeah, so Mothers Against Media Addiction, MAMA, was founded by journalist Julie Scelfo. She is absolute dynamo, incredible. I saw her speak, and I had actually gone to see another person who was speaking around digital wellness and tech safety, but she was interviewing them. And having her stand up there and speak as a journalist so smartly about, the state of the tech and our kids, and have her voice quiver like a mom and just say, I'm sick of this. I'm done. I ran backstage and I introduced myself. I was like, you're going to be how this changes. You're the voice for all these parents who are figuring out we have to do something, but we don't know what. Yeah. So from that, it's brand new. It's just rolling out, essentially kind of following MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, where it's a parent-led grassroots organization that is rolling out in chapters nationwide that is going to allow parents or people, grandparents, educators to start to push back on these sort of pervasive influences in our kids' life. And so we want phones out of schools. We are going to work on educating parents, and then we're going to be pushing for change in legislation.
Yes, great.
And each chapter is kind of going to operate under the umbrella, but what we need here, like I live in New York City, might be very different than what someone might need in Florida or what someone might need in, Montana, right? People who live in a rural area might actually require phones for a true safety reason, right? Right. If they're working around like animals or something like that, this is something that I've heard, versus safety on a subway with a phone. Don't actually need it. It's the exact opposite. So giving each chapter the guiding principles and the plans for execution allows them to go out in their own communities and figure out like what's their best way to, kind of push back in their schools and in their sports and in their kids' doctor's offices or wherever. And it's been wild. I just started with her a couple months ago, and we were up in Albany meeting with legislators and senators, really pushing for them to pass these two bills that are there in New York State right now. And then we did a rally outside of Meta, which was
I saw some pictures.
Really terrifying, and it's kind of like this full circle moment for me. And it is so powerful and really upsetting, to be honest with you, to stand with these families that, again, you don't ever want to be a part of this club, but any one of us could be. And to see them be able to share their story and still advocate for these sort of changes. And we're asking for basically nothing, right? Like these are the like bottom basement, just get our foot in the door to get any sort of legislation. And it's still not happening. And so we just have to keep throwing wood on the fire and shouting from every corner of the internet. The cool thing is I'm seeing more people than ever saying these things and doing these things. And it could be big rebellions like that. Or I like to kind of always tell people, like, how can you raise a little hell in your day to day? So something simple was, we haven't been invited back into the school since the pandemic. Everything's on Zoom. And I was like, it would be really lovely post-pandemic, this many years, to do the parent-teacher conference in person. When can I expect that? Not can we do it? Like, when can I expect that? Right. So taking the power away from these devices that's consuming everything, right? Because it is power. I'm not walking into his classroom. I'm not seeing things. I'm not getting to look at the artwork and everything. I'm only seeing what is sent home or on a Zoom call with his teacher. It totally changes the dynamic. And so I feel like I have a right to be able to come into his school and see what he's doing. And guess what? This morning, we had his first live debate in front of the whole school, and it was packed with parents and grandparents, and it was amazing. And so it's like little things like that all day long. Be a pest, be a parent, be kind of like a 1980s mom. My mother would storm into any office, any room, and we need to start to remember we are the adults in the room.
And we're the advocates for the kids. Like, this is not their fault, but they're the ones being affected, and we have to speak up. And I think a powerful part here with Mama is like, connect with other people in your area that feel the same way, or you can get together with people and go to your school together with some research and some talking points, right? About the devices and your concerns.
Yeah. And also it helps it's much easier to get rid of phones or iPads or video game consoles when 5 other families do it with you.
Exactly.
Right. Yes. So collective action. And because that's really all the kids care about, is being with their friends. And if their friends are all on Snapchat or their friends are all on whatever the new video game is, then that is the hurdle. So you have to be persuasive. You have to, share this information with those you care about and those your kids care about, to try and get them to come over to what I call the dark side.
The right side.
The good side.
The right side.
Yeah.
I just hope we soon get to a point where it's like just such a minority of kids that are on Snapchat. Like they're the weird kids, you know, like they're the kids that don't get it yet, and that you can see very clearly the difference in where they're at with their mental health and their physical health versus the kids that are focusing on more positive activities.
Yeah, I hope so too. I see it coming. I just hope it's faster than I just hope it's fast, because every day that we take, another kid is being harmed in some way. Many kids.
Harmed and dying. You know, it's that's why Scrolling to Death is the name of my podcast, because I saw such an increase in the suicide rates, the deaths by challenges, the deaths by drug overdoses or poisonings because of a pill they bought on Snapchat, that kind of thing. So it's serious and it's here. And okay, so we can go to joinmama.org, right, for more information.
Yep, exactly. Joinmama.org, and kind of just sign up there, and you'll just be on our listserv. And then you get to go from there of kind of like choose your own adventure of how you'd like to get involved. Amazing. And yeah, as far as me, I just told you I'm not really on social media a lot. But if you feel the need to follow along, what I call, it's like the dust balls blowing in the desert. On Instagram, it's at Folk Rebellion. I also have a Substack called Modern Bullshit that talks about not just technology, but how it folds into sort of capitalism, consumerism, and things like that. Also currently dust balls right now, but that will turn back on. Okay. And my book, Raising Hell, Living Well, came out in October. You can buy it wherever books are sold. It's a really nice sort of follow-up to Jonathan Haidt's book of, you know, here's these 4 actions that you can take, but you need to hear it kind of a little bit more from a mother's perspective of how story of someone else who's done it. So it's a little memoir, it's a little how-to. It's actually very influential and persuasive. Yeah. So that's kind of my deal.
I'm gonna get a copy. I don't have a copy yet.
Oh my God, I can send you a copy.
Okay, send me a copy, please. I would love a copy.
Yeah. Of course.
Okay. And I love that it's from, you know, I think that fits nicely with Jonathan Haidt's book, like then coming from the perspective of a mom that's actually taken these steps to see how it has benefited yours and your children's lives. I think that's incredible. So thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to it. And it lived up to my expectations. To the listeners, please connect with Jessica. I'll include all of those links that you mentioned in the episode notes. And I will be back with more insight into social media and the screens and all the things very soon. So let's be sure to stay in touch.
Oh, we will. Nikki, thank you again. And honestly, I cannot thank you enough for being such an amazing voice in this fight. We need you.